And Michelle Brown here, along with our good friend Kim Baer, as we are talking about something that to some folks might be a little uncomfortable, but at the same time, very necessary.
Absolutely. So I thought we'd talk about living wills this morning, power of attorneys, and then, of course, a normal will and why you might want one.
Okay.
So I thought maybe first we'd talk about a living will, because a lot of people just don't know what that is.
Yeah, explain what that is.
Sure. So a living will is, I'll give you an example. Let's say that maybe I'm going to go in and have surgery, or I'm just getting older, and I want to make sure that my husband, my spouse, my children all know what my wishes are. So a living will basically tells everyone, if I'm in a coma, I don't want this, I do want that, so we have a whole checklist, and so it says if I'm in a coma, I want these things or I don't want these things.
Is it almost like a menu?
It is a menu. It is a menu. We have a whole chart, and we kind of counsel people as we walk through it and share with them some stories, that we've seen happen, and then that way people can kind of, hopefully make an informed decision.
Those are hard decisions to make.
They are.
When you're not in the,
When you're not in the, but what it does is, and if you're unsure, you always just say yes, and then, but the nice thing about it is it doesn't make your children or your spouse, they don't have to make those decisions. So, some people feel very strongly that, look, I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want to, if I'm going to be a vegetable and at the end of the day I'm going to be in a nursing home, that's not the life I want, and I want everybody to know that. If you don't have a living will and you're unable to make those decisions, then your spouse or your children, whoever is there, they're going to be forced to make those decisions. And I've been in cases before where I've had a client fill out a living will, and then I've been called to the hospital, and a distraught son wanted to override the living will because he didn't want, he wants his mother to live, he wants his mother to come out of this, and so trying to explain to the son, she did this for you, she doesn't want you to have to make these decisions, and the living will's binding on the hospital. As long as they've got a copy of it, they're going to follow it.
Okay.
So that's just what that is. It's just something.
What about somebody who doesn't have a spouse, or they're
right? Then you can basically, then it tells the hospital. Let's just say that maybe all you have is friends, or you only have minor children. The hospital, then it's a directive for them to follow. Then it's as if they could have the conversation with you.
Now, when you go, we're just using surgery as an example here, but say you're going in for surgery, would you have to present that to them ahead of time, or would the hospital have to track that down?
Yes. No. So one of the first questions that they ask you, and usually it's on the intake information, is, do you have a living will? Do you have a power of attorney? And so I tell people, keep a copy in your glove box, because usually if somebody's rushing off to the hospital, they're going to be in their car. Make sure that your husband or your kids, or maybe even your neighbors, that people around you have a copy of it, so that way, and usually you also can give it to your family physician, and the family physician will just add it to your chart.
Okay.
So
that might be real easy.
Yes, yes. So all great things to do, and it really does serve a purpose. So the other two documents I wanted to talk about are power of attorneys, and so you can have a power of attorney for finances or for medical decisions. So let's first talk about finances. So a lot of times people will come in, they'll say, I don't want to give power of attorney to my son or my daughter over my bank accounts because I can still write my checks and I can still do all those things. And they're worried that one of their children might step in and kind of be bossy or take control. Well, what they don't realize is that in our power of attorneys that we draft, we can add a section that says it only becomes effective if a doctor has declared that you're incapable of making the decisions. So you should, in my personal opinion, I think everyone should have a power of attorney for financial and for medical, because if you knew the number of times I get calls and they say, hey, grandma's in the hospital and she's had a stroke, or my mom just had a heart attack, or she's in a coma. If mom or grandma are not of sound mind, it's too late. We can't do a power of attorney.
You can't.
We can't, because grandma and mom have to sign it, and they have to know what they're doing. So it's just a wonderful thing to do, now, figure out.
It's only in effect when it's
exactly
needed.
Only in effect when you need it, and then that way it's
that's a peace of mind for the whole family.
It really is.
It's not just for your own sake.
It really is. And we can put in there, let's say that you and I are married, and so maybe you're my first choice, but we're young, and so it might not go into effect for several years. But just to
We've been married so many times.
We have, and divorced.
And divorced, yeah.
And neither of our spouses are very happy about it. But anyway, So let's say that my first choice is going to be you and your first choice is going to be me, but in the power of attorney we also can say who's our backup person. So that way we're filling it out today and it's going to be good for 20, 30 years. I mean, because we've got some backup people. So just in case I were to pass first or you were to pass first, we don't have to redo it. So we've got those types of things.
That works. Okay.
Same thing with regard to power of attorney of medical decisions. I've met with lots of clients who come in and say, you know, I love my husband to death, but he's not the person I want to make those decisions for me. Yeah. And so, you know, maybe you've got children and one child's the drama king or the drama queen, and that's not the person, you know, but you've got somebody who's a level head, you know,
and this is very, common in families.
It is common.
It's not necessarily the oldest one in the family either.
No. So you know, just something to think about. I mean, you know, and sometimes it's you know, I love my husband or I love my wife, but they're in stressful situations. They have a hard time, you know. And I think if something happened to me, they'd be distraught, and so I just don't want to put them in the position of making those decisions. So you can pick a friend, you can pick a neighbor. I just did one where a client picked a neighbor, so which I thought was unusual because she had a big family. But anyway, each to his own. So that's in place. And then the other, and those power of attorneys and living wills are very cheap. They're like $100 each. So it takes very little time to put them together. And
you have them.
And then you have them, and they're inexpensive. And we work really hard to make sure that we have backup people for everything so that you don't have to do it again. So. And then, of course, we have the wills that everyone always puts off to the last minute. And so one of the things I always like to talk about is situations that you might not have thought about why you would need a will. So for instance, if you and I, let's be married again. So we're married and we have 3 children. If I don't have a will and I die, everything I have is going to go to you. And so maybe I'm just fine with that. But let's say then now we're divorced. And something happens, and I think that you're really bad with money. That was one of the reasons why we got divorced. Now, if I don't have a will and our children are all under the age of 18, when I pass away, my money, and I don't have a will, my money's all going to go, everything I own is going to go to the children. But they're minors, so who's going to manage that? You, the person that I just got through fighting with to get my share because you're bad with money. So you just need to be thinking about that. If you've got minor children and you're divorced, you know, that's something to think about.
Will eliminate that problem.
Yes. And then another thing that we see as people get older, maybe they've divorced or they've lost a spouse and they remarry. Okay, so let's say you don't have a will, and now you've got 3 adult children, and you're remarried. If you were to die, your spouse, and you don't have a will, your spouse will take 50% of everything, or up to, or $50,000, whichever is greater. And that might be just fine. But it also might not be fine. Maybe I've married you and you've got plenty of money, you don't need mine, and everything I've worked hard for, I want to give to my kids. Well, that's not what's going to happen if we don't have a will. You're still going to get 50%.
So you need to spell that out.
You need to spell that out. Or maybe we remarried and we've been married for 20 years, and so I want to make sure you're taken care of, so I want to give you more than 50%. Maybe I want to say, hey, Lou should get everything because we've been married for so long, even though it's a second marriage. So all of those things, if you don't have a will, you're kind of...
But you can specify all those different scenarios in the will.
Absolutely. I mean, in the will I can say, you know, I don't like my kids, they don't get anything, you get everything.
And I've heard of that happening too, yeah.
Or I've got one child that might have a substance abuse problem, so I want to be careful about that. Or maybe all we really care about is we want to make sure that you have the house, you know, and then everything else can go to my children. So yeah, we can specify, and so then the will then is in control. So if you have a will, then you can spell out exactly what you want.
And how long does it take to draw up a will?
Oh, usually about a week. Yeah, we have a questionnaire somebody fills out, and again, those prices aren't that bad. I think that it starts at like $400. So it's really just not. It's not very expensive.
And again, you can be done with it.
Yeah, you can be done with it.
That's the thing that's
You're
key
prepared,
about that.
You can be
have
prepared.
everything laid out how you...
Right, and the nice thing is too, is if you use a lawyer, as opposed to some of these things online, I mean, we're going to sit down with you and say, okay, here's all your options, and here's what this means, and here's what that means, and here's what we've seen. So that's the benefit of using a lawyer.
All right, get a hold of Kim. What's the easiest way to get a hold of you, Kim?
Yeah, just give us a call, 515-279-2000. We also have the 515 injured phone number too.
That works. Wonderful. Good to see you again.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Good information.
All right, don't go too far, folks.